Well, hello and welcome. Today we have Ian Taylor from Ian Taylor Trekking joining us, and he's got a great story to share with us that takes place in the Himalaya. Ian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us who you are, what constitutes your background, and just some of the details that provide us with a little bit of character before you jump into your story.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Ireland, born and raised in Dublin. I have my family my dad comes from the mountains, but never went up there. So he would drop us off at these national parks and we would hike around hills. My sister and brother had no interest in that. And I was the only one that kind of ended up adventuring. I was in Ireland last week and my sister and my brother live within like 3 minutes of my parents. So I kind of ventured out into the world and ended up here in Colorado. I mean, I'm 5,000 miles away from home. But I've been lucky enough to travel all over the world. My wife is from the States and we met in Dublin. She was doing her master's in education. And I don't know, 15 years ago now we met. And I've had amazing adventures since I was in my, late teens.
Yeah.
And kind of moved towards trekking. Actually, climbing was my first love, rock climbing, and I climbed all over the world. But then, obviously, as you get older, it's not so easy to do that. Then mountaineering kind of took off because I went to university in Glasgow in Scotland. Really loved that, and it was much easier than the dedication you need for rock climbing. And then the evolution is now into kind of trekking, and that's kind of how Ian Taylor Trekking has kind of evolved into that. It allows me to continue to do the trips that we do without there's some risk still, but not as much risk as I would have taken in my 20s.
Yeah, sure. Which can be said for most of us.
Yes, and I think there's a lesson I learned on Everest was you should know your limits and not be shown them. And it's interesting now, like as a mid-40s guy climbing with people in their 20s, and yeah, technically I'm better than them, but physically they're like they can outperform me hands down. I would never say that to them, but the reality is, you have to know your limits. And in the mountains, you definitely don't want to be shown them.
Yeah, knowing your limits is something that I can't wait for you to break down in context of your life and your story. But backing up, so you grew up in Ireland. Dad used to drop you off with your sisters at national parks, and that spurred a love and an interest for outdoor spaces. And you eventually became interested in rock climbing. Is that the right progression?
Yeah, I think my parents obviously wanted to do whatever they wanted to do, and that was an easy outlet for us. But they also, I was dropped off at like Scripture Union camps. Like I would go on these camps, and we would obviously learn about faith and Christianity, but we would also do like rock climbing and kayaking and adventure stuff and biking. And I think always, I'll never forget my parents buying me my first bike because it was like, oh my God, I can get like 5 miles away from the house. And that was like a big adventure. And then it was like the next week, well, let's go a little bit further and a little bit further. And then, it just grows from there. And I think all of those things, just being let loose in the outdoors, a mixture of climbing, I just found it really interesting, the kind of mental side of climbing, just kind of having to think, relax, figure out what you're going to do and then do it. So it slows down everything to a kind of an interesting way to kind of solve a puzzle. So I loved it, but then obviously you get older and it's much harder to perform at that level. So it was really my parents that kind of, not that they were adventurous in any way, but they pushed me. My dad was the kind of counteractor of my mother. My father was get a degree, go to get a job, and get a good paying job that has a pension and benefits and just settle
Hmm.
down and get it done. My mother was more the kind of get out there and live and go to Scotland to university, go and travel the world, go and figure it out and figure out what's for you.
Yeah.
So there was a nice balance of that in my parents. But yeah, they spurred me on to kind of take on a little adventures that kind of kept on moving towards bigger ones.
Right. Okay. So, dad, in an effort to get you outside and off of his hands, puts you in the minivan, loads you up, puts you in wild spaces, takes you to summer camps. You gain enough exposure to hook into rock climbing and understand that that's part of maybe something that's bigger that feeds an element of your character that you wouldn't have otherwise seen unless you had put yourself on a rock wall and figured out some of these rock puzzles.
Of
But that
course.
lit the fire, and mom's basically saying, "Hey, I'm all about being free spirited." Dad's saying stability, go the academic route. You find some pairing of it. It sounds like, and you head to Scotland. Is this where mountaineering and your now wife come into the mix?
It's definitely where the mountaineering came in. My wife was after university, after traveling.
Okay.
After university, I actually took a year off to travel the world and went to Thailand and climbing, and then I was in Australia and New Zealand doing some more mountaineering, and then I was supposed to travel for a year, but it ended up being 10 months. Ran out of money, I had to run home to my parents. But before that, yeah, I spent 4 years in Scotland. I think going up into the Scottish Highlands, there's nowhere like people think about the Himalayas and Everest being some of the coldest temperatures in the world, but Scotland has some gnarly conditions
Is that right?
for mountaineering. Super cold, windy, nasty, damp, climate. Here in Colorado, it's like dry. It can be 20 degrees outside and it's warm. 20 degrees in Scotland is with a wind chill is Arctic conditions. So
Mm.
it was a great learning. And I did bring my wife back there, and we took a big group to climb Mont Blanc in 2009, and we went to Scotland, got her into it. She wasn't as keen as I was, but her kind of draw on me was the more the hiking, the trekking, nature, relaxed, enjoying of, I was more like goal driven in my 20s, more focused on uh, more getting to the peak rather than the journey that came along with that. Uh, she has kind of changed me, and um, now I'm the other way. I'm all about the journey, all about the experience. That's kind of her doing. But yeah, we met actually after that. So I went off traveling, came back to Dublin. Um, she was a Division One tennis player.
Oh,
Somebody
wow.
said to her, you got to go to Ireland. Um, just try it out. So she went there on a short-term visa and ended up staying, and then applied to do her master's in UCD, which is University College Dublin. And then I was kind of managing this facility, which had like the biggest swimming pool in Ireland, had a big gym and all that. And that's where we met, in the gym. And I would be on the stairmaster with a big backpack with 40, 50 pounds in it. And she was, running on the treadmill and then doing weights. And I'd see her come in, I'd say, look, wave, and I'd try and go over and talk to her. Um, and that went on for probably like a year. um,
Awesome. So you're
so,
doing
and
you're doing mountaineering training and everybody else is doing normal people stuff. And she sees the guy with the heavy pack on in the gym and goes, he's got a story for sure. But you
yeah, or she thought I was a stalker, because that's the story she would tell.
that's right. Hey, creepy guy, what's in the bag?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. Okay. So you guys met at the health club and you said you were managing that?
Yeah, at the time, yeah.
Okay. What did you go to school for? Was that like part of a recreation program or rec management, or
There
talk to us a
was
little bit
rec
about that?
management and business. So I
Okay.
did study business and then rec management, or leisure or leisure. It's
Yeah.
called leisure in Europe, but leisure.
Leisure here.
Um, but it was a mix. It was more business, and then I liked the idea of the kind of. I didn't know if I was going to go into like personal training or physical, something to do with that, or education, or set up a business, or I wanted to keep my options open.
Sure.
So we ended up doing that for a um, while I was thinking of ideas. I think when I finished university and I took that year out, which my dad did not want me to do, and my mother was like, "Go and do it." That's when I started to. I went, to Africa, and I was in Nepal, I was in Australia, and I was in Thailand, and I started formulating ideas around how could I run a business in these regions, running, whether it was, I suppose at the beginning it was like climbing, but it's such a niche of people. Then it evolves into like hiking and trekking. So that was kind of, I suppose, the evolution of my thought. But that year out after college really helped me formulate an idea. But then when I came back and I had no money, I had to get a job. So I applied for a few jobs. That was a job that I got, and I kind of stuck with it um, for a while. And then I suppose before my wife, some of the friends that I'd made when I was on Scripture Union camps and Christian camps and climbing camps and all this stuff, I kind of, just a chance meeting on a bus in Dublin, ran into a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in like, I don't know, 10 years. And then he invited me to a party, met up with my good friend that I'd known since I was 8 years old. And I'd lost track of, like, I was out doing my own thing, trying to figure out who I was, what I was doing. And I
Sure.
met up with my friend Graham, who ended up going to Everest with me, um, like a few years later. So we kind of like, while I was working in that job, I was still trying to formulate ideas, trying to hook people in to climb. I mean, it's a very small community, so I was like, I got to try and work my way back in with some friends, see who's interested, who's got the money, who's got the drive, who's got the passion for it. And my
Yeah.
buddy Graham, two of us kind of clicked. We'd been on a trip to Peru um, in 2005. And from there, we were sitting on the back of a bus at 15,000 feet, and there was a girl talking about climbing Everest. And I was like, we looked at each other and kind of went, gee, maybe we could do that.
Just
And
drew
that
you
was in
in.
2005, just like that. And I suppose I was looking for something, I'd be climbing and doing peaks and doing stuff, but nothing that anyone would consider big. And I think, or a great achievement. And I think I was always striving for that. Like personally, I wanted to prove to myself that I was good enough, that I could take on some of these challenges, whether it was big mountains or Everest, and actually achieve it. So when I heard that, it was like a trigger. Um, and he was like, let's see if we can try and do it. And that was 2005. So the next season, we went to Nepal in 2006, went up to Everest Base Camp, did a climb, so like up to 20,000 feet, came back down. We were sitting in this bar in Namche, kind of the Sherpa capital of the Everest region, and
Okay.
there's a big bar there with like T-shirts from expeditions and trekking groups, and I'm, I we I took off my T-shirt. We started writing down like peaks that we had climbed and ticked them, and then we left one open. It said Everest with a box, and then we had like Irish Everest Expedition 2008. Watch this space. Stuck it up on the wall on the 24th of May, 2006. Went away from that, going, okay, we got a plan. Literally 2 years later, we came back and got to the top on the 23rd of May,
No way.
2008.
You
So it was
summited
like
on that day?
the day before, but
That's incredible.
yeah. So within a 2 year period, we figured out how to go through this whole journey. Um, and like I didn't have much money. I didn't have much like really high altitude experience. So it was kind of a big learning curve, and a mental challenge to kind of do it. But I had to do it. I mean,
Golly.
I
That's
had to
such
go.
a that's such an incredible lesson in vision casting and goal setting too. I mean, think about the percentages involved there. And statistically, that just doesn't happen. You don't line up 2 years out, two guys green behind the ears, you and Graham going, hey, we've never really done any high altitude stuff, but we're in and we like that concept. So I love what you did in the bar down there. You wrote, Everest 2 years out, and then you left that box unchecked. But just to think that you actually came within 24 hours of meeting that, summiting Everest with all of the variables that go into summiting Everest, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think at the time you're nervous. You're like trying to formulate the idea of what the purpose of the journey was for. Are we getting in over our heads? Are we taking on too much risk? Are we going to die on Everest? Are we going to, what are we doing this for? Like, why take on this journey? It's very selfish. You know,
Mm,
it's not fair with my family and people that know me if I don't come home. So there was all these drivers to kind of push us to really fine tune our physical ability, really get to understand, you know, VO2 max testing and testing for fitness and altitude and oxygen in the body. And then we kind of set out this plan of climbing 4 mountains on 4 continents in 1 year to raise $100,000 to build the Mount Everest Primary School, which is the bigger story because we went out to Uganda right before the climb, did some filming, and there was this little shack in the middle of nowhere, about 2 hours west of Kampala. There was like 40 kids in the school. Now there's like 240 children in the school. So it was kind of, we wanted to do something that was, I think when you actually give back, or like when you think about offering yourself up to do something, um, that's when you see like things happen. Like if
mm,
you're doing it for selfish reasons, I think things didn't always happen for me when you're kind of just thinking of yourself. When
mm,
we started to think about other people and what it could do for other people, that's when things started to click. That's when people started to give money. That's when people started to really take us seriously, and have more respect for what we were trying to do. We weren't just going to roll up, climb Everest. Yes, there was some sales pitch. You know, I was trying to be the youngest Irish person um, to climb the mountain. There was only 300 people in the world that have ever climbed Everest in their 20s. So I was like trying to get it in and before I turned 30. And there was all
wow.
these kind of hooks, but ultimately those are just hooks to try and get people in to give money.
Sure.
When you do it for some other reason, better, bigger than yourself, I think that's when we see the real results. And that school is a lasting memory. Then because nobody really cares if I stand on the top of Everest. Like you can go, oh,
Mm,
you know, the question people ask is, did you get to the top or not?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, nobody really cares. And when you say
Right,
yes or no, they've moved on to something else. So
right.
really, and especially nowadays when there's far more people climbing the mountain than there was
Sure.
14 years ago when I did it. So the school became that kind of lasting, um, I suppose, project. And I'm involved with the charity now, and it inspired me to do other stuff where we built 4 more schools in Nepal, and taken on other projects.
Yeah, man, some of that. Okay, so you are far more, and I suppose this is a part of the story that we need to get you to. You're far more calculated than being just a young green behind the ears punk from Ireland who says, I'm gonna do Everest in 2 years." When you and Graham said, we're gonna set a goal to do Everest in 2 years, you just backfilled a few details that tell me and our listeners you're far more calculated and far more measured than perhaps that scene in the bar give you credit for. And maybe this is perhaps part of the reason why my response to you actually summiting within 24 hours of your set goal came across so surprising, and perhaps you downplay that a little bit. Um, I don't know if I'm reading that correctly, but it shows me that you have a tendency to measure your goals and then figure out how to backfill all of the proper steps to get there. Um, and and that would prove to be that would prove logical in the line of work that you carry out. So tell us a little bit about after before you start your Everest story, Ian. Share with us perhaps that last little portion of your personal background that will help us understand what you do with your trekking company. So, last off, I think you said you had moved back to Ireland you were managing a health and fitness or something within the health, fitness, and hospitality industry. And you met your wife while you guys were working out in close proximity. Take us through that last bit where you got married, you and your wife moved to Eagle Vale and started your company together before you back up and tell the story about Everest that takes place just before that.
Yeah. So I think back to, 2008, coming off Everest, coming home, took me probably a year to figure out what it was for. And I'll tell, you'll understand more of that when I tell some of the story of what it was like high in Everest. But
okay,
I went back in the gym and I was training, and she wasn't even my girlfriend right then at that time. So it was like we were talking about it a lot. A year later, I came back from Everest in the beginning of June. 2 months later, I started dating Laura, who's my wife, and we ended up kind of, we in the gym that after Everest, I set up this kind of trip to go to the Alps, and I tried to recruit members, 10,000 members, and got a big group of people to go climbing. I started taking people out hiking and climbing in the Wicklow Mountains, south of Dublin, and getting people trained up and prepared. I started working with some other companies, US companies, UK companies, bringing groups to them. Like to go, we took groups to Kilimanjaro. My wife came with me. We started taking groups to the Himalayas with other companies that were, Western reputable companies. Because I had been on trips earlier, but I needed to flesh out the kind of experience. And then I started doing some guiding courses and kind of filling in the gaps. And Laura kept kind of pushing me towards the trekking stuff. And that's where we could get more people into trekking, because we took a bunch of people to Mont Blanc and all 14 of them made it. And Mont Blanc is a technical climb, and a challenging climb, but they still all made it.
Let me jump in a second. Break down the difference between, so you started off rock climbing, then you transitioned into mountaineering. Now we're talking about trekking. Just real quick, break those three down for us.
I suppose rock climbing is more technical and much tougher challenge. If anyone has seen Free Solo or something like that, climbing a rock face is physically it's a very different, they're very different techniques. Although mountaineering encompasses all of them, rock climbing is just purely about trying to scale walls or scale multi-pitch sections of rock. Mountaineering is more general. It's more snow, rock, glaciated terrain, and some trekking thrown in. So you got all kind of disciplines of mountaineering, whether it's fixed line Himalayan style mountaineering, general alpine style mountaineering, crossing glaciers, technical rock and snow terrain. But it's more at a 60, like 30 to 60 degree, 70 degree angle. It's not vertical. And then trekking is, like hiking, although trekking is just multi-day hiking. It's kind of like trekking to Everest Base Camp for 2 weeks. That's like a trekking adventure where you're doing multiple days back to back, where hiking is just like a 1-day event. Go out, hike, come home, have a nice hot shower.
Yep.
Where we don't get in other parts of the world. So that would be what those three things are.
So rock climbing, scaling vertical face, mountaineering, more implementing, so alpine, subalpine environs, both, but creating maybe some more technical objectives, and all the way up to and including glacier crossings, where you've got the ladder systems, you've got fixed lines, you've got people like we see in all the magazines and advertisements. And then trekking is more akin to what we would call backpacking, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I didn't mean to derail you, but just wanted to make that
okay.
distinction. So, okay. So you and Laura have now hooked into perhaps some of the more, the commercial side, or some of the more commercial implications, which is what you want to align yourself with professionally, of trekking, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's not just that you have to know how to guide people through a mountainous region to a place, whether it's the summit of Kilimanjaro or uh, to Everest Base Camp or somewhere at the base of a higher mountain where you don't have to use technical skills. We had to master, online marketing. How are we going to present our trips? How are we going to be different? What is unique about what we're going to offer, and how are we going to present that? And how are we even going to get clients? Whether it's what are the techniques we used are going to use to make this happen. So what I had to do is we actually got married. Our plan was we stayed in Dublin from 2008. We got married in 2010 in the US in Orange County, big Jayhawk fan for anyone that knows their basketball. And we then moved back to Ireland because it actually takes 2 years. It took 18 months to get a visa to come to the States.
Okay.
Even though we're married, it's not so easy to get into this country
Right.
legally,
Right.
and that's another conversation.
That's a
But
whole, yeah, sure.
so it was a tough process to go through, and there's a whole lot of things to do. So we had to move back to Ireland after getting married. I took a job, like a business development job, uh, while we were both kind of working on the website, learning about all the things we needed to do, taking groups to Kilimanjaro, taking groups to Everest Base Camp and the Himalayas in those 2 years. So we were like working trying to put together all of the things we needed to do
Wow. Yeah.
to kind of
All the
make
hats.
Ian Taylor Trekking what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had to learn
Yeah.
a whole lot of new skill sets. We could apply some of the stuff we'd learned before. Um, Obviously you have to be personable and you have to have good customer service skills and all that stuff, but you still have to be able to get clients to come with you, and they have to buy into the fact that you're going to look after them and you're doing the best for them. So that was the initial process of learning. Once we did all of that and started implementing some of the techniques and things we needed to do, which is another conversation, we had to then really think about what we were going to do for our local teams. Like I met my head guide on Kilimanjaro, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. As a young kid, I saw real potential in the guy. And in 2019, he was voted Kilimanjaro's #1 guide.
Yeah. I saw that.
Um,
That's incredible.
so and then we started investing in him. We helped him set up a couple of businesses and he would pay us back. And then we started bringing in more guides around him, and he inspired all of our teams. So then we would start sending all those guides to college and putting money back into them. And then we hired Kilimanjaro's #1 guide, and then we hired another person to kind of manage the safari side.
Okay.
So we're kind of investing back. Like in Nepal, we have I don't know, before the pandemic, we had 12 full-time staff. All people are coming back again, just working for Ian Taylor Trekking. If you don't invest in the people, I think back to the Sherpas or anybody in the Himalayas,
Yeah.
these people are risking their lives in support of other people's dreams. And in some cases, not while we're trekking, but when you're climbing. And, it's hard to see these people with such hearts for service and for other people. And their culture is all about giving, and they give of themselves 100%. Not everybody does that. And I wanted our teams to give that experience, give that cultural experience, give that climbing, trekking experience to our clients, so that it just changes their lives, so they can, because that's what it did for me. I mean, when I went to Everest in 2006 to trek up there, do some climbing, come back. I mean, it was mind blowing. I was like, holy crap, this is an experience that everybody should have, because it's humbling. The mountains
Yeah.
are humbling. The whole experience is humbling. And for us as a director in our a direction for our company, we wanted to make sure the staff that are on the ground are actually the ones that are benefiting from what we're doing. So obviously you have to take care of yourself, but we haven't hired 6 or 7 staff here selling trips. It's myself and my wife, Laura. And we're actually hiring another staff member here soon. But really it's just us. We're not, we're back investing in the people that are
Yeah.
actually making the difference on the ground. And that's, to me, that was a more sustainable approach to the communities that we serve. Um, and now, like, and these things evolve all the time. Now we're looking at, carbon offsetting, and then as you carbon offset, carbon offsetting in the countries that the clients are actually going to.
Sure.
So it's like it's constantly evolving, but always looking towards the communities that we serve and that work with us.
Yeah.
That's why when the earthquake happened and I was in Kathmandu, when it happened, and 10,000 people died
Yeah.
in 5 minutes right around me.
Man.
You know, our head Sherpa, he was like, let's my village is destroyed. He's like, crying, and I'm like getting on a plane like 7 days later, going, all right, now we got to up our game and do something more. And that's where the kind of this 4 schools that we built and putting 200 stoves in homes, these people we have so many opportunities, whether we believe that or not, in this country. And me living in another country and coming to live in this country, the systems here are far greater, far better, and it really is a gift
Mm.
to be able to be here and live here. So serving these people and giving them something that gives back to their community, or at least helping a little bit, um, they're going to work better for us. And that's not the reason to do it, but
No, but
it's
yeah,
it's just it's just trying to it's
it's
just
all
trying to
built
make,
in.
yeah. And you're trying to, because then when we do that, we invest in people. Uh, they're going to invest in our trips, and they're
Sure.
going to invest in our clients, and going to make it really special.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that is incredibly loaded when I say, hey, fill us in on those 10 years post, post recreation center. In those years, you had so you and Graham summited Everest, which you're going to talk to us about. And that had a profound impact on you, and it turned on a light bulb. It switched something. It built character. It tugged something out of your character that you had not teased out before that. But amid those 10 years, you and Laura figured out how visas worked. So you bounced back and forth between Eagle Vale and Dublin. You figured out business licensing. You figured out marketing. You figured out how to effectively start site visits and start scouring the globe for the places that you would perhaps want to work. You started team building. You started web developing. You've got all kinds of things going on in that time frame, but effectively what you were busy doing is building Ian Taylor Trekking, and what you and Laura have built has now recognized something that's even more more juicy to talk about, because you guys have recognized that everything has so much further every business transaction that you have has so much further implications than just a financial bottom line. And now you're starting to talk about the philanthropic stuff that you guys get to be a part of, and it's just it's a joy to be able to sit here and hear that from you, somebody who is enterprising and is adventurous and for sure is wired to create business. I love that. That is what I mean. America's backbone is truly small business, and I think small businessmen like us really are drawn into just the romanticism of that. You mean I can build something from nothing? What an awesome canvas. Yes, that is something that makes our country so special. So to hear
Sure.
you jumping into that's awesome. But to also hear that it takes on more than just the financial attraction, oh man, that's cool stuff. So I'm
That's the beauty
just,
of America.
yeah,
You know
man.
what? You know where I come from, they tax businesses far more than here.
50%.
So when you have more disposable income, like, you can decide whether you want to spend that on a Maserati,
Yeah.
or do you spend that on helping people. And that's what this country is all about for me. I mean,
Mm.
everywhere when we moved to this country, the amount of people that helped us is mind blowing. That kind of
Yeah.
like the mentality in Ireland was, oh, nobody wants to help you. There's like it's stagnant, and even sometimes the attitude,
It's pessimistic.
it's pessimistic. Here, amazing.
We're
People are
optimists.
amazing. Yeah, and that's where I that's why I'm drawn to it, because that's what
Ah,
I am.
let's go. I love it. All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for the snapshot. Certainly, that's not all encompassing, and we recognize that. But wow, what an awesome journey you've already been on. Can't wait to see where Ian Taylor goes from here. But let's zoom in on the space that really changed you, and that's the Everest trip that you and Graham took. Tell us a little bit about what I guess maybe what catalyzed that. Just kind of give us an on ramp there again, and then break us right into it, man. Tell us the story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were in Everest 2006. Said we're going to come back in 2008. We set out this goal: 4 mountains, 4 continents. Started doing those trips. Even on the third trip to Aconcagua, it was like it's almost 23,000 feet in Argentina, South America's highest peak. Myself and Graham went there. We went on a shortened itinerary, and all of the trips that we did, we kind of we we had less acclimatization, less time to adapt to the lack of oxygen. He actually performed really well in that situation, and I didn't. I couldn't go up to high altitude that quickly. I made Aconcagua. I think we were like day 10 or something crazy. We went up so quick. Um, and the guide that was there said, if you go to Everest, you're going to die. You're not ready for it. And I had to come home from that trip. This is January now, 2008, and we're supposed to go to Everest in March 2008. So 2 months later. So we're on this kind of climb a mountain every 3 months, with Everest being the final one. And obviously we were training in between and building up our physical conditioning as we went. But that was a real challenge, because I'm like, he was supposed to go to Everest with us and he canceled the trip. So we came back in January, myself and Graham. I remember sitting on the stairs in the gym, after doing like a 3-hour session. We didn't have a team to go with. We didn't have, we were told, I was told that I wasn't good enough for the mountain. But I knew I was. So there was like this debate on my head going, should I be going on this plane? Am I taking too much risk? I emptied my bank account. Back then we kind of signed up to this hybrid trip, and it was like $30,000, which is still a lot of money to put on a trip. But like now they're like 60, 70, 80. There's $100,000 trips depending on what service you want. But I was still investing all my money. I was in debt. I was actually living with my parents because I had no money. Every cent that I earned was going back into climbing gear, gas money to get me to the hills so I could go train, etc. I didn't drink alcohol for years and years. I didn't buy any clothes. I just invested in this project.
Just
So to be sitting there with
shoestring budget.
shoestring budget, with all of this pressure of building a school, when you start telling the media and people that you're doing stuff like this, there's interest and people want to know. And then you're sitting there 2 months before you're ready to go, being told by a professional that you're not good enough. And that's really when I had to like decide, is this the journey we like? Are we taking off? Are we doing too much?
Wow.
So went to Everest. I made the decision to go, and Graham was like, let's go. We're good enough. We've trained for this. Like I was training 3 hours a day in the gym, 5 days a week. Then I would go out and do 8 hours of training in the hills, doing 3, 4, 5,000 feet of elevation, carrying a big backpack, sleep in a tent for 3 hours, get up again and do it the next day. Like my resting heart rate was like 38. My VO2 max was like 65. I mean, I was super strong, super fit, super ready mentally, except for this fact that and I struggled up the mountain, but I knew I came to the crux of what the problem was quickly. The crux was that I needed more time to acclimatize. I couldn't be rushing up and down these mountains. Like Kilimanjaro, the first time we went there was like 5 days, and we were so sick on the top. And I've done it like 39 times now. We came down in one day. like to the gate, like we're sitting in a pool at you know, looking at the mountain, and you're like, what the hell was that for? We were sick on the top of the mountain. You know, it's just stupid. So
Hmm.
I was learning all these things as I was going, and I applied that into what I do now.
Yeah.
And everything is, if you don't have acclimatization on a mountain, or you don't have enough days to acclimatize to the lack of oxygen, you've got nothing. So we decided that week in January, we're like, okay, we're going to find a company that has more days, more time. So we picked this 72-day trip, longer expedition. We took more time trekking into base camp. We had more time lower down to get the body creating more red blood cells to carry oxygen. Um, Went up to Everest, um, arrived there on the 1st of April, and we're there for like 7 or 8 weeks. That was the kind of plan. And from there, you're like getting your gear organized. And we had to carry a lot of our gear up. We didn't have full Sherpa support. So we carried our stuff up to Camp 1. You come back
Okay.
down up to Camp 2. And nowadays, they do acclimatization on other peaks. We were into that dangerous ice fall that people have seen in documentaries and videos, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 times,
Wow.
because we had to get our equipment up the mountain. So myself and Graham would climb independently through the icefall. You hear cracks, like you're climbing in the dark, so you hear cracks going off, avalanches going off.
And this
Um,
is the famed Kumbu ice fall that, I mean, has skyscraper size, ice columns.
yeah, it's definitely the most dangerous part of the mountain. Um, Definitely, I would never go back in there again. Just it's so dangerous. Like, it doesn't matter how good a climber you are. There's stuff on your right side, left side, underneath you. Anything can crack off, um, and kill you at any time. And
Makes you feel so small, I've got to imagine.
you're acutely aware of it too, and you have to keep pushing and moving and moving. And when you start acclimatizing, it takes like 8 hours to get through. We were kind of had done many rotations, we got that down to like 4 hours, so we could move quite effectively through there.
Hmm.
And if we timed it right, we could stay ahead of other people, so we never got slowed down getting through the ice fall. But it was nerve-wracking. I'll never forget the last time coming through there. You know, and you just, there was a big avalanche came off. The History Channel were actually filming, um, and it wasn't like directly behind us, but it was a big crack, and then right across the icefall, right behind us. And you're just like, you know, we're just finishing, and it's a mental, like, you're just like, you're just completely drained from the experience of being to the summit. But now you're like, yeah, what's all this for? I could have just been wiped out in that avalanche.
Hmm.
So it is risky, highly dangerous. You know, there's 68-foot ladders you got to cross. Some of them are four together. Some of them are at an angle. Some of them are bouncing up and down as you're trying to make your way across. Sometimes you see people with like stuff hanging off their backpacks, not packed properly. They're just so tired, um, so wasted from the experience of going through that ice fall.
Wow.
And I didn't enjoy any part of that. And, you know, when you move up higher in the mountain, then you got to face, you know, a lot more challenges in terms of the altitude, in terms of what's going on. And then we started to see more of the risks of high altitude. I remember getting into Camp 3 at 23,000 feet. And there was a guy, you know, like talking, but he was really struggling. And like 15 minutes later, he was unconscious,
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
you know, being dragged down the mountain. From there, you know, we slept at that height that night. The next morning, you know, 50-mile-an-hour winds come in, the temperature dropped to sub-zero conditions, and my whole arm froze. I was that cold, and we had to get back down the Lhotse face, which is that kind of, you know, 60-degree angle face going up the mountain that you see in the kind of Khumbu above the icefall. Um, and we're coming down that, and like literally I couldn't use the equipment, so I'm like wrapping the rope around my arm and like walking like straight down some of the sections to speed up the process. And I came back down, and I had to put my hand in the water, and my hand was like felt like it was freezing, like frozen. I couldn't feel it. And eventually the feeling came back, and I was just left with a little frost nip in my fourth finger, because I remember coming back typing, and I was missing words and stuff. But it came back fully, so I didn't get any frostbite. But it was a reminder too that now we're moving higher in the mountain. People are like really struggling, potentially dying. There's nasty weather that can roll in at any time. Um, and I'm back on Aconcagua, you know, thinking, is the guide that told us that we weren't good enough, is he right? And you
The
start
little
questioning yourself as you go higher, and you start chipping away at the experience. And then when, those little things kind of niggle in your head, because physically I actually found it quite straightforward. Like I didn't arrive into camp and like fall into the tent. I mean, I was totally fine. I could go again. And I had physically trained. So that was the mental side for me. I knew that I could do it. I knew I had the physical ability, the technical ability I had, because Everest isn't technically that challenging compared to some of the other things that I'd done. So, when you start moving up higher, you start thinking about Camp 3 is where 23,000 feet. Camp 4 is the kind of start of the death zone at 26,000 feet, where nothing above that lives. They don't really know, but even 48 hours of exposure to that elevation could kill you. So you don't have much time. You kind of have time to sneak up there, get to the summit, and get back down. And we're like 6 weeks into the expedition now. We're like we got into base camp on the 1st of April. We started our kind of 7-day summit ascent of Everest on the 19th of May. So
from
we've been
Camp 3,
from base camp.
from base
So
camp.
we've been going up and down the mountain for 6 weeks.
Okay, so to
climb
climb Everest, yeah, break that down. To climb Everest, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to fly into the Himalaya on a weekend in May and make sure I line it up with climbing season, find a Sherpa and go. Like this is a 2-month process, and you are up and down and up and down and up and down in an effort to make sure that your body will manage to perform during that window that you just referenced above the death zone,
Yeah.
so that you have function. You have your body will work, and you have mental faculty in the death zone so that you can do what you've set out to do. But this is a project that takes what did you say, 6 weeks, 7 weeks?
Yeah, like when you add it all up, give or take 2 weeks getting into base camp, getting into Kathmandu, then 6 weeks of up to Camp 1, Camp 2, back down to base camp to recover, back up again, and base camp is at 17,500 feet. Above 18,500 feet is kind of the critical, like your body cannot acclimatize fully, or
Okay.
it can't acclimatize. So base camp is strategically positioned below that.
Okay.
So you can go up above, get used to the pressure difference, come back down below, get some rest, recovery, and then push up again, then push a little bit higher. And while you're pushing higher, getting your body used to the lack of oxygen, you're carrying equipment and gear that's needed for the higher camps.
And this is where you and Graham were going through the ice fall.
So we're going through the ice fall, coming back down, going back up again, coming back down, going back up again. And you're doing that rotation quite a lot to get all the gear up, to get acclimatized. Then you would stay in Camp 1, move to Camp 2, come back down, come back to base camp. So there was 6 weeks of that. And then when you come back down to rest, you get like 4 days in base camp, but you'd still exercise and keep the body moving, eating well, staying away from other people so you don't get sick. And then really the jet stream is the biggest challenge. Once you've done all that acclimatization, the monsoon is pushing in from India. It's bringing warmer weather. And what it does is it lifts the jet stream off the summit. Some years that doesn't happen. Some years there's like 2 weeks of window where there's no wind high in the mountain. Sometimes, as we've seen from history, the jet stream leaves the top and then comes back with violent aggression when people are high in the mountain, and people die up there. So we were kind of trying to get in position for a 7-day window where we could go up to Camp 1. We actually, on the final rotation, we skipped Camp 1. We went from base camp to Camp 2, took a full rest day in Camp 2. The next day moved up to Camp 3. The next day, then we moved up to Camp 4, and that's the positioning point for the summit attempt.
Okay.
So it's another 3,000 feet from there to the summit. So we get into Camp 4. What was it? The 22nd of May, 2008. We're sitting in Camp 4. Graham was really struggling. He had picked up the kombu cough, which is, breathing in such dry air all the time in the glacier. He actually picked up a really nasty cough, and he had when he went home, he actually found out that he had cracked two ribs from coughing so much.
Oh, so
So
he's
some people,
violently coughing up there.
he's really bad. He's in such pain. He actually,
Ah,
when we went to base camp to rest, he actually went lower down to see if he could get more oxygen and more recovery before going on the summit attempt. But uh, it actually didn't work for him. But he got into camp 4 a little bit later than me. We sat there. We started mentally trying to, gear ourselves up. And I have this on film. I'm talking about, we can do this. We're here now. We've put so much into it. And he's like, I don't know, in the background. And I'm like, no, we can do this. And he, we just kind of talked that through, and we said, well, we're going to try, we're going to go. Um, but then like 2 hours later, um, there was commotion in a tent next to us. And there was a Swiss climber who had died of a heart attack, who had gone up to the summit or attempted the summit, came back down, had a heart attack, and then died in the tent. So there's all this commotion going on. Then someone comes into the tent and says, somebody just died in the tent next to you. So like we're preparing mentally, physically to go and do what that same person did, the night before. Uh, and they died trying.
wow.
And at this point, you don't know whether they were, I was like 29, Graham was 29. I mean, I didn't know if they were 30, 40, 50, 60. You don't know anything. You're just thinking somebody died right next to you. I mean, I remember going out to go to the bathroom and turned around, pulling up my pants, and there's a body, right there behind me. There's bodies kind of scattered around. Somebody's just died. But you have to then either decide in your own head, am I willing to take this risk? Am I strong enough? And you have to constantly evaluate. Like lower down in the mountain, you're like every day like you would in your own life, how did today go in work, or how's things going with the family, or how's life in general? Up here, it's more heightened. Every minute we're checking in with ourselves. Are we able to do this? Can we push through? And you're working through all these scenarios and looking at the terrain. Can I do this? And we decided to go for it. And at 10 o'clock that night, we got dressed, we got up, we hydrated, we started moving. I was starting to climb around people that were going slowly, kept on pushing, got to the balcony. Actually, somebody had told us that we might have to step over a dead body that was on the route. So at the balcony, which is at like 27,600 feet, got to that point, it was in the dark. So I actually unclipped from the rope and moved around to another rope because I didn't really want to have to step over a dead body on the way up. So I didn't see anything on the way up, clipped back into the rope, started going up towards the southeast ridge to the south summit. And about halfway up that section, there was a big wind that came in, almost like to the point of I couldn't stand up. And there was about 4 climbers ahead of us. And I knew they had radios, and I knew one of them was a Scottish climber, one of them was an English climber. And they were on the radio saying, it's not as windy up here. Just wait it out, keep going. And in my head, I'm thinking of in 1996 when a bunch of people died on Everest, the kind of Scott Fisher, Rob Hall story, the Everest movie from 2015, the commercial one. And you're thinking in your head, is this going to happen to me?
Am I
Am I going to
next?
am I next? Constantly. So you're constantly in this evaluation mode, constantly thinking from step to step. Have I still got fluidity? Am I still
Wow.
strong? Are my legs strong? Am I breathing right? Am I focused? And you just keep in that zone of focus, persistence, keep moving. And you're just taking one step and then taking like 4 breaths. And it's like big, deep breaths in. And then you keep stepping and stepping, and it gets steeper and steeper. You come up to the south summit, and you can see that kind of famous ridge to the summit. You see, it's called a knife edge ridge, where like 30 people have died just after the south summit. Then you see the Hillary Step, and then you can't see the summit, but you know it's right there. And I remember there was a Sherpa behind me tapping me on the shoulder, saying, giving me the thumbs up, saying, "Strong, you're very strong." 1 hour to the summit, and we're 7 hours in now, so it was quite quick that we got to that point. 1 hour to go. I felt pretty good. I was definitely scared out of my mind, mentally, physically. Yeah, my calf was sore. my legs were a little sore just from the lack of oxygen, but I felt strong. So I remember stepping out onto that ridge. As I said, 30 people have died on that ridge. The knife edge ridge, there's like a 10,000 foot drop on this side, 8,000 foot drop on this side. Is a half-meter wide ridge. So when you're walking across that, you can see both sides. You can see the big drop off on both sides. And you're making your way across that ridge. And then all of a sudden, somebody started shouting. And it's just dusk. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning, a little bit of light on the horizon. And somebody starts shouting back, I'm blind. It's Martin. I'm blind. And he was up on top of the ridge. So it was a knife edge ridge. He's up on the top of the knife. Like if he falls off this side, it's a 10,000 foot drop. I'm looking across the ridge and I can see that he's on the same rope as I'm on. So if he goes off that side or he goes off this side,
You go too.
he's gonna pull us off the mountain. And if with the weight load of like 3 people on there or 4 people, the rope could snap and we're gone. And I remember just my heart rate must have been like 200 at this point. I mean, you're just like scared out of your mind. And if you saw that on the street, you could run over and maybe do something. We're at 28,000 feet at 5 o'clock in the morning on this narrow ridge, and you can with no oxygen. And like to get over there was a challenge. And I remember the Sherpa just shouting from behind me, "Do like stop, stop, stop," because if he moved, he could fall off. So we got over to him. He's like, "I can't see," and I knew the guy Martin from Scotland. We had climbed together, and he's like, "I can't see, I can't move." And it looked like it was black under his eyes, and he just couldn't see anything. And it's what it is the pressure in your brain swelling, um, that it cut off the vision to the back of his eyes. So it cut off the retina or whatever. So he couldn't see. So he's blind now. I'm having to try and I'm like, okay, we got to get him back across this ridge. Again, in your mind, 30 people have died here. Can't make a mistake. And literally we had to I had to get him around me and hold on to him so he wouldn't fall. I got in behind him and the Sherpa was in front, and we got him to put his hand on the Sherpa's shoulders. And then we put his feet in every step placement to get him back to the south summit where there was less risk.
Oh my word.
When we got him back there was a Sherpa there that said, I'll look after him. I'll take him down. And I remember just crying, like going, I mean, he's dead. I mean, he can't. How's he going to get down? And the Sherpa said, we can't help. Let's go to the top. And you're debating now whether this is the right thing to do or not. And I'm like, again, at 28,000 feet in the dark with a little bit of light, thinking, I'm here for a reason. I came to do this for myself, but what if he dies? And the Sherpa's like, you're still strong. We can make it to the top. We can get back and we can help him. And that was enough for me to kind of justify continuing. So I remember continuing back across the ridge, get to the base of the Hillary Step. At the bottom of the Hillary Step, I had to wait for a few minutes. There was an English climber there, so he was going up. And I remember just thinking about, if I go up here and go blind, like Martin, I mean, I might not get back down this technical section. It's pretty steep, 40-foot rock and snow section called the Hillary. It's gone now. It fell off in the earthquake in 2015.
Oh, okay.
But it's a technical section, and you have to be able to rappel down that vertically. So if you can't see where you're going, that would be quite shocking to be able to do that. So you're questioning yourself. But then you're evaluating yourself. Am I strong enough? Can I do this? How do I feel? And I remember I did break down a little bit and start crying again, trying to figure out, is this for me? And then I just went, look, I can technically do it. I can push through the summits like right here. I know the route. I clipped in, I went up, and then it was what I thought was about 5 minutes to the summit, ended up being like 25 minutes, but it was more gradual terrain, and you just kind of step your way up, get up onto the top. And there was it was amazing. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun is just coming up. There was very few people there. There was little bit of wind, but nothing major. And you stand up on the top. And I remember I was doing it for the school, the Everest school, for the charity Fields of Life. And I pulled out the logo. I pulled out the Irish flag. I did all that, but I was in my head, I was like, okay, it's time to go down. We got to go back. So there was I remember feeling, oh, I've just done this. I got to the top of Everest. It's a big deal. But really, I didn't really focus too much on that until I came down. And I know that 80% of accidents happen on the way down. I know that, um, you know, the chances of something going wrong are real. And the summit is not the summit. The summit is getting down safely. So I was keenly aware of that, took some pictures, helped somebody else take a picture, uh, snap some shots on the top, looked at my temperature gauge, which said -40. Uh, and when you're in that temperature, you don't even know that it's like -40. It's like whatever. You're so focused.
Yeah.
You're so honed into what you're doing. So took the pictures, stepped off the top, collected some rocks that I have here in the drawer, and kind of started making my way back down. And I kind of was, it's something I see on mountains a lot now is people start to switch off. They've reached the top of Kilimanjaro or they've reached wherever their goal is. And then mentally they think they're done. And I try and instill that in people now is like, don't do that. You have to be able to keep that same focus to be able to get back down. Because I started to lose it a little bit. I was like getting tired. You start to think about the things that like the pain and the suffering a little bit more. And I started to question myself, but I was like, I gotta focus on getting down. Just keep going, one step, one step. Got back down, crossed the ridge, back down to the balcony. Didn't see the dead body that we were told might be there. Went down a little bit further, sat down, and there's the body of Scott Fisher just right off the trail. And I remember just sitting there looking at the body and thinking, okay, that's enough time sitting down. Let's go. And that was enough to kind of get me up. I could see the camp way in the distance. And I was like, I just keep moving, keep focus on every step, focus on every step. Hold on to that rope. Do not let go. Like I'm just like talking myself through it. And I got back down to Camp 4 in 3 hours, went straight to Martin's tent and he was in there. He could see again.
Oh, awesome. I was going to ask.
Which is incredible. And that's when I realized Graham hadn't made it. I think I had heard something on the radio, but I wasn't really clear. But he had turned around at the balcony, that kind of 27,600 foot mark. I think he started to see double and he kind of realized if I could probably keep pushing and make it to the top, but I mightn't get back down again. So he made the smart decision. And I think that's when you think about knowing your limits, that was a smart decision to kind of make that turn. I remember coming back and just embracing him and just bursting into tears. I mean, it was hard to comprehend what we had done and what was going on, but we were lucky. And I think it took me a while to process that, but we had to stay there the night. We had to come back down. We still had 2 more days to get back to base camp. So we would come back to Camp 4. I felt like I could have kept on going down, but Graham was sick. There was other people that possibly needed support and help. So we stayed there. I remember that afternoon actually going out looking for memorabilia from like the 1950s expeditions and just seeing if there was anything out there because there is a lot of rubbish at Camp 4. But I remember sleeping hard that night. We got up the next morning early, made our way back to Camp 2, stayed there the night. That was the first time I called from a satellite phone to my parents. Spent the night there, and then we were back in base camp that next day. And I remember the camera like at the History Channel were there, and I remember them, asking me, how does it feel? And I remember just the response I gave was something like, and it's in the DVD that we filmed, but it was something like, I have no idea. We just saw people dying. A friend of ours almost died from going blind. I mean, what is all this for? And I suppose I had a very, a lot of people come down, they're throwing their arms around like climbed Everest. I didn't really have that feeling. I had a feeling of, yes, I've done it, but at what risk? Or that's the whole question about someone asks you, did you get to the top or not? They don't care about the guy that almost went blind, the guy that died in the tent next to you. There was two guys when we were coming down at the balcony that kept on going, and the Sherpa was saying to them, don't go up, and they never came back down again. So like you're thinking of all these things of what has just happened in the last 2 or 3 days, and it's hard to compress and decompress and understand
That's a
what
lot
all
of
of that
reflection.
meant.
That's a lot of yeah, that's so much in front of a camera, and so much so soon.
So it's tough. And I think then when I look back on that footage, I was like, I need to then, or when the guide started talking to me back in the tent, I was like, yeah, I really need to think about what this is for. Graham hadn't made it. So it was the two of us on this journey. Yes, we still had to raise money and build a school, and we had to fulfill all of the things we promised and said we would do. But there was a lot of mixed emotions on the way down. I'd say it took me a good year to kind of work my way through what I learned. And I think the stuff that I do now is comes back to those 3 days high on Everest, of coming down, summiting, and trying to evaluate what's important, or why was I on this journey? What was it for? And who can benefit from this now? And I think that's where my head kind of sat. It was like, well, we're building the school, we're helping these children. But then there was a lot of Sherpas, like you see those Sherpas that helped Martin all the way down. They sacrificed their summit to help somebody survive. There was other things just people helping us throughout our whole journey, the local people, the journeys we went to in Africa and South America, the people that were helping me achieve what I wanted to achieve. And it came kind of full circle more towards that. It came back to, okay, I've been lucky enough to do this. At the time, I think there was only 1,300 people that had done it. I was one of 300 people in their 20s. I was the youngest Irish. I felt a responsibility to use that to better the situation of the people that had helped me get to where I got to. And that journey continues now, 14 years later, and the things that we do and the decisions that we make in the trekking company all come back to, if those people didn't help me, yes, I helped myself and I trained and I prepared and I was physically ready, technically ready. But at the same time, there was people there sacrificing more than I was. And I needed to recognize that somehow. And even our head climbing Sherpa now in Nepal, who Kevin DeVries has met, he was on Everest in 2014. He was 10 minutes above the avalanche that came off and killed 16 Sherpas. He's been on Ama Dablam when avalanches come off and kill his brother-in-law. There's so much death from the Sherpa community. And he came to me after that and was like, I need a full-time job. I can't go back to Everest. He's got 2 kids, a wife. So I'm like, yeah, I got to figure that out. And he's our head Sherpa's nephew. He comes from the same village where we built schools. He actually was building some of the schools in the off season. That's where the focus has to be, is back to these people that are making a lot of sacrifices. So I can come home and go and do a lecture or sit and do a podcast and maybe help somebody here decide that, adventure is great because it opens your eyes to a lot of different things. And having adventure in your life, that's when life starts, is at the edge of your comfort zone. So when you're pushing yourself and achieving things and growing and evaluating yourself and pushing yourself, you start to see what life is about and what it's for. So I think
there's so much there, Ian. You just broke down so much for me, and I'm going, oh, I have so many questions. I want to know what it's like to try and play roulette at 25,000 feet. I've got to believe that's like trying to make decisions on second 57 underwater. It's like you're ready to go to the surface. Your body's screaming at you to stop, and you have to make these life or death decisions, and you have to maintain surgical focus. That's crazy. I have all kinds of questions about that. What is that like? How does that decision, how do you make those decisions like this, like the Sherpa did when he saw strength in you, but he told, he told you, don't go to Martin. But at some point he relinquished that and said, I think we're going to actually go to Martin. And you made that decision, and it was the right decision. And Martin got off the mountain safely with his vision. That to me is fascinating, that you did that underwater, like your body was starving for oxygen. The Khumbu icefall, the textures, the size, the scale, the video cameras that are down there from large networks. There's so many elements to your story that's just, it's like crazy. Like, it sounds like another world. But some of the things that you guys got exposed to, that I think you miss in the cover shot or the hero shot or the Everest summit shot, which I'm so glad you got to do. Like, that's really cool. And it is a gift to say, yeah, I have some stones from Everest, or to have that shot of you with your Irish flag representing your family, the people who have celebrated, your progress along the way, your accomplishment in spite of perhaps some of the seed of doubt that was cast in Argentina. There's all kinds of things to celebrate about that summit. But the texture of your story, like the embrace that you gave to Graham at Camp 4, and the swelling of emotions that come with that, that's where the story lives. Or that piece where you go, you know what, this might not be all about me. There might be more to this story. Why is the lens always on the guy who's holding the flag? Why aren't we ever zooming in on the guy who just said, I'll forfeit my summit opportunity so that you can stay alive and go back to your family? And he made that decision underwater. I'm just going, man, there's so much that you had. And to your point, when somebody sticks a camera in your face and says, what was it like? You said earlier you needed a year to answer that question. I can only imagine you're still trying to figure out what was that all about. And I just knowing how adventure has shaped my life, and comparatively, like scaled down adventures have shaped my life. I've got to believe that Everest trip is still shaping you, and you're still gleaning character, and you're still gleaning wisdom, and you're still gleaning, opportunities for growth from that episode in your life. Now, in hindsight, when was this? 2008? Is that what you said?
2008. Yep.
Okay. So you are, we're 15 years removed. Where are you at now? What's a good way for you to respond to the cameraman who says, what was it like?
Well, I think, and I have to say, I mean, that is a great summary of all of the emotions that I went through. For you to be able to sum that up like that is quite amazing. But I think when someone asks me now, which they do all the time, I immediately go to the staff, like the people that I work with now in Nepal. I think about them all the time. Like right now, we're trying to set up a coffee shop in Kathmandu so we can, get 50% of the profit back towards making sure that the projects that we're doing are actually funded. We're trying to build a medical facility, which is like $80,000 in this remote village that has nothing, because they need medical care. So I think I knew that I wanted to do the trekking business, and I knew that obviously I didn't want to work, and I wanted to do my own thing. Everest allowed me to do that. It allowed me to sit back and use the media coverage and use the content like that I had produced and thought about on Everest to make Ian Taylor Trekking happen. And we kind of did that. Like, it took us really 15 years to make that happen. but it's really happened for us. So now my focus is all about other people. So it's all about other people looking to climb Everest or climb mountains. Like I go to Kilimanjaro in a few weeks to do back-to-back climbs with like 32 people. Um, Watching, like, there's a lady that was in the Himalayas with me 3 months ago in her 50s. You know, she trained hard for Everest. She got her Everest base camp a few months ago. Kilimanjaro is her ultimate goal. She came back. She's training 5 days a week. She was just emailing me this morning saying, you know, this is what I'm doing. I'm carrying the backpack. I'm milling of the stairs. This is like, I'm ready. I'm doing it. And it's like to see that, or like an Irish lady who's like 55, who struggled on the Inca Trail, who came home, put on a backpack, started carrying weight up and down the hill in her local town, and then climbs Kilimanjaro like 6 months later, after dedicating herself to the training and preparation. Like, we've had thousands of people come on our trips. Um, to watch that happen is really amazing, to be a part of that. But also that our staff are now getting, uh, like, we've got the same crews, the same team every year, every trip. We've invested in the same people, so that watching them grow and evolve and buy homes and build homes and set up businesses and become Kilimanjaro's number one guide, or our head guide in Peru who works for us full time. Like he's like, yeah, we can set up a new restaurant in the Sacred Valley, and we can then give back to the community that are giving to us. Like it's like watching these people buy into what we believe in terms of service, in terms of what we believe uh, life is about, like helping other people, because that's ultimately what it's about. And I think when I think about Everest, I think about that. It helped me understand that there's bigger, that I'm not that big of a deal. Really,
Yeah.
I really am not. It's like
Yeah.
you're nothing. You're just part of the story. The story is much bigger than that, and you have to remember that you're just a part of it. Because all these other people are living out their dreams. Um, Even if I'm not there, like there's like one of our guides in Kelly 7 years ago, he came to me, couldn't speak English, and I'm like, okay, go and learn English. Boom, next year, speaks English. I'm like, okay. So he's like, I want to do more. He got a job in tent crew for like 6 months. Then he became a server. Then he's like, he proved to me that he deserved to go to college. So we paid for his college, and now he's a guide. I mean, and these guys are now helping their family, buying land, helping build their communities, and they're all doing it out of that kind of story of, um, I suppose it's a mixture of a lot of stuff. It's really love, like people feeling loved, and then they share that love in whatever way they feel that is important to them, their families, or communities. Like all I'm doing is doing that. I'm like, I love you. I love that you're working with us. I
Yeah.
think you're an amazing person. You deserve much more than this, but this is all we can give. And they give that back in, like, when you start giving, then you get that back in spades. Um, like that opens our world up to be able to help other people buy land, set up businesses, look at other projects to raise money for, and then I sit on the board of Fields of Life, who we built the first school in Uganda for, and watching them, bring clean water to 1 million people over the last decade is quite amazing. So there's just
Yeah.
like serving other people, helping other people, loving everybody. Um, that rubs off, and I think that's what we try to do in our business, and that's what Everest did for
Wow.
me.
I love your story. Thanks so much for sharing it with us. Thank you for all you're doing for the community at large, the mountaineering community, the Sherpa community. It's a joy to sit with somebody whose heart goes beyond a dollar. And yeah, I think it's it's just cool to hear somebody say, it's not about me, it's about others. So cheers, man.
It's a privilege to talk about it. I mean, that's why I like doing this. And um, yeah, I mean, the more I think there's so many, you could focus on all sorts of bad things in the world, but all I see is good. I
Mm,
see, whether it's in Africa or all over the world, I see people just doing good things for other people, raising good families, trying to get ahead in life while fighting for something bigger than themselves. I mean, there's nothing greater than that.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's great. Okay. Quick question about what you've got going on with Ian Taylor now. You and your wife are running how many different trips have you built into your business? I mean, there's probably a handful of them, but of that handful, how many would you say are bread and butter? How many have you done multiple times?
Yeah, we do. I suppose we run about 150 trips per year. 50% of that is in Nepal.
Okay.
Sleeping in base camp, Everest base camp treks, Annapurna base camp treks, Manaslu base camp treks. So a bunch of like just trekking trips in the Himalayas. That's the bulk of that's 50%. Then we do some climbing peaks like Island Peak, Mira Peak, in Nepal, the Boucher Peak, all in the Everest kind of region. And then we run about 25 trips to Kilimanjaro each year. Um, and we run about 15 trips on the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. We do trips then on top of that, smaller trips. Those are like the biggest trips that we run. Then we run like 3 trips to Aconcagua, the highest mountain in South America, 3 or 4 trips. We were running trips to Elbrus, which is in Russia, but we've stopped running trips there at the moment. We run trips in Patagonia. We run trips in Europe. We do some mountaineering training courses in Colorado. And that's kind of the bulk of where we work. So Peru, Kilimanjaro, and Nepal. And there's probably there's like 10 kind of key trips that we run.
Oh, that's
And then
phenomenal.
we're always looking for other stuff. Like we've been running K2 base camp treks in Pakistan, and we have a bunch of trips there next year, but always looking, and we do Cotopaxi in Ecuador. I mean, there's so many different things that we're like trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
but not running them on a big scale. And I think there's a balance. You want people to be able to work on the ground and have consistent work, without over like loading what we're trying to achieve here. So we're like, there's a balance for us. We don't want to be doing too much, but we want to
Yeah.
make sure that, because it's not really, we don't run it like a business. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this. I'd be online trying to learn something else about how to fix SEO on our website. Um, so yeah, it's evolving. And as we move into other areas, we're also looking at projects and things that can work in those communities. But it's also important. I think one thing I learned from uh, trekking stuff is that keep it small, keep it simple, and keep it manageable. Because if you try and do too much, like with everything in life, you do nothing well. So we're like very slowly, we're building everything out. We're
Mm,
not trying to, like I said, we're not trying to turn this into a $10 million business. It's not that's not the goal. The goal is to like make sure we're giving people that experience that, because like I said, I learned about altitude by doing it, and I learned that it's not a good idea to go up quickly. All of our trips now have more time, more
mm,
acclimatization, more staff, more support. Uh, Give people like a fuller experience, so they're not in that mindset of like racing towards the top.
mm.
So all of the trips that we run kind of have that kind of trend, like, and our staff know exactly, because it's our same staff on every trip, every year, all the time. So they know exactly that's exactly what we want: slow
Yeah.
paced, give people time to compress from their daily lives,
Yeah.
and experiencing something cool.
Yeah, and you're a champion of a different mentality. I think the consumerist mentality in mountaineering settings is a recipe for and really an unenjoyable trip. I think the relational fabric is the piece that you're going for. The experiential and the process driven mindset is so much more what you guys garner than the hero shot. That consumptive persona that is unfortunately it does find its way into a central station in this capitalistic society. It's just part of it. We are results driven people. So that might be some of the negative baggage that comes with with the beautiful system by which we were just, singing praises to. But I think if we focus more on that relational side that you are such a champion of, I think we all stand to capture what it is that I'm trying to do too with Adventure Deficit, is to just spread the message of love that comes through putting yourself into these spaces where, man, you're going to face a lot. All of life gets drawn down into tincture form, and it's condensed and it's good and it's full of all the awesome stuff that makes you grow. And if we can spread that message, I think the world becomes a better place.
Yeah, and the mountains do that. They reveal character. They humble you, and then you see your true self.
Yeah.
That's ultimately why adventure is a great way to really test yourself and figure out who you are, what's important, and give you passion to do more things. Like to me, that's what it does for a lot of people I see. They come on a trip. They're broken down. They think they know that what they're doing. They have to deal with the outdoors days on end. But then they see, and then they have to summit, and it's tiring, and they're tired. But then they see all these people serving them and helping them and guiding them and coaching them and helping them. And then they come down, they go, oh my God, I was just given so much more than that. And most people see that. Most people are like blown away by the experience. And you can only hope that people come back and then apply that to themselves, and what they want to see themselves project into the world, and then do it.
Yeah. All right. Final question before we break. So if I were to point somebody who is thinking, hey, I want to give this a shot, I've never really delved into mountaineering, where do we point them? How do we get them connected with you? And what do you recommend as a starting point?
I mean, yeah, anyone that wants to talk to us, like I said, it's just myself and my wife here. It's Ian at iantaylortrekking.com or iantaylortrekking.com. Just type it into Google, up comes our website. If people are looking for more video-based stuff, just go on YouTube and type in Ian Taylor Trekking. We've got videos from Kilimanjaro, the Himalayas. We just did a new one on Cotopaxi last year in Ecuador, and there's some great video content there to motivate people to get out and do stuff. And I think people always ask me that, like from a business perspective, I'll be like, you need to line up 5 treks over 5 years. But the reality is that it depends what people are drawn to. Like if people really want a cool cultural experience, I mean, all of the trips have that, but like Peru, the Inca Trail, like what the Incas were doing, 500 to 700 years ago on that famous trail into Machu Picchu is absolutely mind blowing. And it's a great place to start. Like the Himalayas has like just monster peaks. Like you're standing looking at something that's, 12,000 feet, like from where you're standing in front of you. It's a marvel. It's incredible. There's nothing like it. And then something like Kilimanjaro, that's the experience with the people and the culture there. And then the mountain is so unique, like the highest freestanding mountain in the world. I think it really depends on what people want from the experience. Like Kilimanjaro is more of a challenge. Everest Base Camp is more of a doable trek with the right acclimatization, with culture and history of that region and that mountain for sure. But then there's other parts of the world that are absolutely stunning, like northern Peru in the Huayhuash area that not many people know about. Unbelievable mountains, great, beautiful hiking, trekking. Patagonia is just out of this world, in Chile. And there's lots of places that people can go to discover what's important to them. But you don't know until you go and you start chipping away at, I made lots of mistakes on my journey. You have to go out there and experience something and grow and learn from that experience.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Well, if Ian's story lit a spark today, head over to iantaylortrekking.com and see what fits. They've got a handful of different options, different mountains, different countries, different continents. Shop around, see what fits your style, and get plugged in. You might just find that you've got an adventure that shapes your next chapter in your near future. So, Ian, thanks so much. We really appreciate you. Thanks for sharing with our community. And I can't wait to see what you and Laura do next. Cheers.
Thank you. I think this is probably the best interview that I've ever had. So thank you. And I've done hundreds. So thank you, Drew. This is the perfect way to do this.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.